We're talking about red flags in communication. So those things you may be ignoring or you may think is perfectly innocent or things that may make you feel crazy and gaslighted. um, and so, yes, that's what we're going to talk about today and things that you should look out for. And when should you take action? What is permissible? When should you communicate? All of those things. So, we're going to talk about that today. If you don't know me, my name is Alexandra, and I am a life coach. I've been a life coach for almost 15 years, master's in communications. I'm also a happiness trainer. And I started this channel because I wanted to help people to date more intentionally toward holy matrimony. I started a singles ministry in my community. We have hundreds of people who have come to our events. I'm also developing a couples ministry to help people to not only meet people, but then once you are in a relationship, before you get to engagement and marriage, to be able to have the skills necessary to to just improve your relationship and just make it a more godly relationship and discern, right? Really important to discern whether or not you're with the right person that you'd like to be in a godly relationship with, ideally moving toward sacramental marriage. All right, let's just dive right in and talk about communication. So, and I'll just preface this, I do have a master's in communication, and I will tell you, it is not always easy to communicate. And so I'm going to share all this today with this understanding that these are skills that we get to work on. These are skills. This is maybe like new mindset that we get to work through. Okay. So, and all of these things that I'm going to share are things that I've experienced myself in relationships, and as well as my clients, as well as research that I've done. So let's dive right in. So the first thing I wanted to share is something that happens a lot, and for both men and women, and that is not returning your messages right away. So we live in a text world, and back in the day, people would call you on the telephone. What is a telephone? But now people text, right? And so, and I should post it because people text. And so it's very, very common to communicate through text, right? Duh, that happens a lot. Or WhatsApp or IG or Facebook Messenger. It's some form of text communication. And what happens is that sometimes that might even be the entry point to communicate with you is through text. If you're lucky, maybe you met the person in person and then you can communicate through text afterwards. But sometimes the entry point is the text, maybe online dating. And so here's the thing. When you are developing feelings for someone, or you're even just trying to get to know whether this person is a godly person, if it's somebody you want to get to know better, then how they respond and when they respond is important. It gives you an indicator of their level of interest in you. And so if they are not responding to you right away, that could be, it's not a red flag, but it's kind of like a pink flag, or a yellow flag, whatever you want to say. It's kind of like something to give pause and ask, why? Is it consistent? Is it their baseline, or are they doing it in strategic moments, right? So if they're not responding to you right away after you've texted them, there could be several reasons for this, right? Very innocent reasons. One could be they're working. Another thing could be they're, in a position where they can't really get back to you, or they risk being rude to who their company, like they're with company. But a lot of times, not texting back right away is can be kind of like a power move to show you that they're maybe important, or they're busy, or they're too busy, right? And so, and I will say this from personal experience, I used to do this. I no longer do this, but I used to do this when I didn't want to get back to somebody right away to make them think that I was more important than I am. And so that could be the case. And so if it's being used for manipulative purposes, and at an extreme level, like even more manipulative, is they do it on purpose to make you like them more, right? So one thing is you kind of like, okay, I'm not gonna be too available, right? And it can be done to kind of just give a little bit of this, a little space in between. But if it's done as a manipulative move, that's where many times you don't know this yet, but just kind of assess. That's why I said it's a yellow flag, right? Just keep an eye on it and see. But you want to be with somebody who is getting back to you as soon as possible, right? If they're busy but they really like you, they're going to tell you, right? Like they might communicate with you for 5 minutes or 10 minutes by text and then say, look, I'm really busy. I'm going into a meeting or whatever. They're going to give you some type of explanation. Another reason I'm just thinking out loud here, if they don't respond to you or there's a lot of distance in between, it could be something innocent like they're dating multiple people, right? There's nothing wrong with that. If you're not in an exclusive relationship, you should assume that somebody might be dating somebody else, right? But again, should give you pause, right? Don't assume that you're exclusive or that you're leading to an exclusive relationship if the person is spending a lot of time getting back to you. Okay. And this goes for both men and women, or the pursuers and the pursued. All right. So that would be my number one thing, is that, to just keep tabs on this. That might not be such a full-blown red flag, but this next one is a red flag. And it's in alignment with the not returning your message right away. And that is ghosting. So ghosting is when somebody doesn't return your message ever, or doesn't return your message for a very long period of time that's more than a normal period of space. And usually it's preceded by you guys are texting or communicating pretty frequently. You might even have scheduled plans. You might even be talking about going out for the weekend, and then you don't hear from them for 4 days, 5 days, a week or more, right? So that is them not returning your messages right away, but to an unusually long period of time, okay? And that is a red flag. And here's why it's a red flag. Because yes, ghosting could be that they might be dating other people, right? But they shouldn't be getting back to you a week later or longer, right? Usually ghosting from a psychological perspective, and I did a video on this recently, and you can see it on my live videos, and I'll post a link here later. Ghosting usually has to do with a deeper issue. One could be fear of confrontation. Excuse me. Excuse me. One can be commitment issues. Another reason could be emotional issues, like they're not really emotionally available. Like it's hard for them to have intimacy, getting closer to somebody. Another reason could be that they're using it as a manipulative move, for real, a manipulative move. So if they don't get back to you right away, it's a yellow flag. If they ghost you, which means days go by, maybe weeks go by, then it's a red flag. Okay. And I think you should seriously consider if somebody's ghosting you or you feel ghosted. Maybe in their mind, they're not thinking it's ghosting. But if it's been a few days and they haven't gotten back to you, then seriously consider whether this is somebody that you want to proceed with. Because what happens is when we're lonely and maybe the person seems like great on paper and they're getting back to you, and like there's been several days in between, that is like those are breadcrumbs. And when we're talking about intentional dating for holy matrimony, guys, do not accept breadcrumbs, right? It's better to be alone and to be open to a godly partner who is going to be an amazing future spouse potentially, than to accept breadcrumbs from somebody who cannot even communicate with you frequently enough or consistently enough, right? So look at this as a red flag for sure, because if they're not consistent now, can you expect them to be consistent or to rely on them when you're in a relationship. And if you were to marry them, right? Now, some of this could all happen at the beginning of the relationship. And so if it is a red flag and there were some reasons, some really legitimate reasons for that behavior, and you can forgive them for it and they acknowledge it and they do like you and they act like they like you going forward, okay, right? Everybody can make a mistake. That's why we need to look at this, right? So there's the yellow flag and the red flag component to it. Okay. So the third thing, communication red flag to look out for, is related to the ghosting. A moment ago, I said fear of confrontation. So if they are not really expressing what they feel, actually, let me go with they can't express their emotions. Let me go with that one, the third one, and then we'll get to fear of confrontation later. They can't express their emotions. If it's really hard, like if they're monotonous, like in their communication, or anyways, they're pretty even in their communication, in their expression, then it's hard. It might be hard for them to really tap into their emotions. This could be this is a yellow flag, I would say, right? Look to see if there's something deeper there, why they're not able to express themselves. There could be some past trauma there. And all, by the way, everything I'm saying could also apply to you, right? So if you notice this in yourself, then, this is something maybe you need to look deeper into, maybe getting some therapy or something like that. So if they have a hard time expressing their emotions, then that's definitely something for you to consider. Maybe ask them some questions, dig a little deeper. If I know something that kind of we were mentioning before with ghosting is this fear of intimacy. And maybe when you start asking them some deeper questions, if they're not able to answer, or they're not answering in a way that's opening them up to being more vulnerable, that's another way of not being able to express themselves and express their emotions, right? And so again, that's a yellow flag. That doesn't mean that they're necessarily doing anything wrong. It could be a wound that they have, or past trauma, or something, maybe they were hurt, right, from a past relationship. And so this is a yellow flag, something you want to explore, dig a little deeper in. Now, one thing they can do if they're not able to express their emotions, kind of in tandem with that, is avoiding. So if they're avoiding answering questions, either things that you're trying to get more intimate with them and talking more intimately with them and digging deeper, or if you confront them with something and they avoid you, this is another yellow flag. That could potentially be a red flag. But again, we're kind of trying to see what, there might be some underlying issues that could be resolved with therapy or talking to a priest or spiritual advisor. So I would say definitely if they avoid, and I had some avoid, that's an attachment style. Avoidant attachment style has a tendency to kind of escape, not wanting to deal with the situation, not wanting to deal with hard situations. And that could be confrontational situations, or that could be things that are asking them to be a little bit more vulnerable or more intimate, right? And so this, is a yellow flag, I would say, meaning you want to proceed carefully. You want to proceed with caution, dig a little deeper, ask some questions, and see how the person responds, right? Now let's get back to the fear of confrontation, because there's a little bit of overlap with a lot of things that we've just mentioned. So if somebody is not able to, to express themselves when they dislike something, this, you really want to make sure from the beginning with the person that you're dating that they are telling you things that not only that they like, but that they dislike. If they are not able to communicate things with displeasure or things that they do not like, that is, again, a yellow flag. Because maybe they're presenting themselves in a way that makes you think that they like everything. And then, like you might be falling in love with somebody who's fake, who's basically not really expressing themselves. And that is going to hurt your relationship later. So if you're with somebody who is always in agreement and somebody who everything is perfect, right? I'm a happy person, and in my last relationship, I expressed the things that I did not like, and I placed boundaries at the beginning of that relationship. Why? Because I've learned to do this. I used to be that person that everything was happy and great, and I didn't like confrontation, and that hurt me, and it hurt the other person, and it hurt the relationship. And so if you or the person that you're with has a fear of confrontation, not able to express displeasure or things that they dislike, not able to have difficult conversations, this is definitely a red flag. I mean, I'm sorry, a yellow flag. It could be a red flag, and I'll share some red flags later, some really, really red flags. But for now, maybe it's time to dig a little bit deeper. Maybe give them some space, or ask them why, ask them some questions and see if they can begin to share little by little, if they can open up little by little. And so with fear of confrontation comes setting boundaries. Now, I have always said that I believe that setting boundaries is actually a communication issue, or lack of boundaries is a communication issue, because you can have the boundary, but if you don't communicate it, it's no good. There is literally no reason. And if you have a boundary and the person oversteps your boundary, and you like avoidant personalities, you go away from it and you escape without sharing the boundary, then you're not no better than the person overstepping their boundary, because you need to communicate it. We are not mind readers in dating. So we need to be told, and we need to have those conversations. So if you or the person you're with is fearful of confrontation, fearful of setting boundaries, and does not communicate those boundaries, and does not communicate when the person oversteps the boundaries, that is definitely a red flag. And I think that's an actual red flag, because it will hurt you now and it will hurt you later. When things really get tough, imagine marrying somebody who has no ability to handle tough situations. You want to know that now. You want to know that now before you get further into a relationship. You want to know that now before you get more emotionally invested in the relationship. You want to know that now before you get engaged, and definitely before spending the rest of your life with somebody. And so that might be something that they can learn to do with love and compassion and empathy. Somebody can learn to do that now in the beginning of the relationship, but you do want to know that before it's too late, okay? Because this could get really bad. And also, like I mentioned a little bit ago, if they cannot express things that they don't like, then they're not really being true. They're not really being authentic to themselves. And so it's important for you to be able to express the things that you like and dislike. And so a lot of that has to do with that communication, being able to communicate it and not being afraid to communicate it. Because if you're afraid to communicate the things that you dislike or the things that you need to place boundaries on, then that is probably a self-worth issue. And so again, these are deeper issues. That communication is kind of like the external component, right? But the real underlying issues are wounds that we often have. Could be from growing up, could be from past trauma, could be from past relationships. And so I definitely could think that that's a huge one that is a red flag. So another thing, this is an absolute red flag, not a yellow flag. If they, when they don't like something, so in the one case we're talking about, they don't like something, they avoid it and they don't even talk about it because they're afraid of confrontation. In this case, it's the opposite. They get mad, they scream, they get frustrated, they act controlling, right? That is a huge red flag. That could be you're talking to a narcissistic person or somebody with narcissistic traits or somebody with personality disorders. And that is dangerous. You're getting into emotional and verbal abuse. That is an absolute red flag. And if it might be that that's the way that they learned in their household. Maybe when mom and dad got mad at each other or didn't like something, they screamed at the top of their lungs to try to get, have a power play. And that's what they learned. And so, but it's a red flag. because you cannot be with somebody who is always expressing themselves when they do dislike something like that, right? And again, that is getting into abusive behavior, and so that is an absolute red flag. Maybe if they have a level of self-awareness, then you can propose them going to therapy. Obviously, you need to set boundaries with them, and we're going to talk about some things that you can do now if the person has any of these communication yellow flags or red flags. Some steps I suggest for that. So yes, anything where you feel threatened or disrespected, maybe it triggers an emotional response in you. Like maybe the person screams at you and then you are the avoidant and then you try to avoid the situation, right? That's a good sign that the person is being on that more emotionally abusive space, as if it triggers that response in you, right? And then two more things. One is the next one is passive aggressive communication. So passive aggressive communication is where they say things and they respond to you in a way that's not overtly aggressive, but it could be sarcasm, it could be underhanded comments, it could be when it's passive aggressive, if you feel a certain kind of way with the way that they said something. And passive aggressive behavior could be manipulative. And so again, I would say that's a yellow flag if it's done sparingly, but if it's done a lot, like if almost all the time that you have conversation with the person you're dating, if there's passive aggressive behavior and communication, then it's a red flag. Because again, you want to be with somebody who you can properly have disagreements with. You want to have mature discussion and communication, even if you just like something. You can't have passive aggressive behavior does not help you to resolve issues, right? It only makes you feel bad and you don't really resolve it. It could be a manipulative tactic. And therefore, that's why I said if it's done sparingly, maybe that's something, an old pattern that they learned or behavior that they learned from their family or from their parents. But if it's done a lot, it's for sure is a red flag. And then the last one I want to talk about today, and there's a lot of communication red flags and yellow flags, but the last one I'm going to talk about today is silence. And so this silence could be similar to ghosting, it could be similar to avoidance, but silence is an actual manipulative tool. And you'll usually know when it's done when you had a disagreement or when somebody did something, or maybe they're a little jealous or they're controlling and they give you the silent treatment. And that could be by text or it could be when you're together, they give you the silent treatment. And that is super manipulative. It is a red flag. And if you are dating somebody, you absolutely need to confront this. Unfortunately, when we see movies and love stories and books and novels and all that stuff where it has these relationships and people do these manipulative things and they don't really call it out as bad, a lot of these things I mentioned today are things that are kind of like endorsed, like there's no big deal to it. And that's not true. It is absolutely manipulative. And if somebody is giving you the silent treatment, that means that they are not able to express themselves and they're doing something to get a reaction from you. And this is not mature. It is emotionally immature. So absolutely, you need to confront that if somebody gives you the silent treatment. Unfortunately, what happens is a lot of times the person having the silent treatment feels guilty, whether or not they did something wrong or not. I remember one of my roommates in college told me that her father, when her mother did something, and I believe it was like not even anything like a big deal, but maybe if the mother talked to a man or something, I don't know, whatever. It wasn't like the mother wasn't doing anything intentionally bad. And the father would give the mother the silent treatment. And I remember thinking, that is savage. Like, who does that? Like, that's so manipulative. And And so if that somebody's doing, that was a married couple, So if somebody's doing that to you when you're dating, this is an absolute red flag. Do not get to the point where you are engaged or married to somebody who gives you the silent treatment, because then that is going to be, you're going to have a miserable marriage if people are giving you the silent treatment every time they don't like something. So here are some things you can do. Here are some suggestions that you can do. Number one is that you need to work through your stuff enough to be able to communicate. And so if the person is having issues with communication, you need to be the bigger person. You need to be emotionally mature and you need to communicate. Do not be afraid to be vulnerable and to express your own concerns with the person, right? It's only going to improve your communication. It's going to improve your trust if you're able to communicate yourself. If you're able to express yourself, communicating yourself is going to improve your relationship. And if you see that there's some issues, you're able to maybe back out of the relationship. If it's a big enough issue, if it's a big enough red flag, then the way that they respond to you could be an indicator of the strength of your relationship and whether or not you want to continue in the relationship, right? Because we need to marry somebody for their character. Yes, we want, the faith is a huge part of why you are in a relationship with someone, why you get married to them especially, but their character. Are they kind? Are they emotionally available, emotionally mature? Are they oh gosh, I was going to say that. Oh, do they have integrity, right? And somebody who is not able to communicate back with you, even when you vulnerably communicate with them, that is definitely something that should have you give pause. And depending on the severity of it, is a red flag, right? And I will say that maybe age could be a factor here. Like, for example, if you're in your early 20s, maybe some of this emotional maturity still needs to be developed, and so maybe you can both grow up together with this. But if you're in your 30s, your 40s or beyond, and you're still having issues communicating with this person, then it could be a pattern that they have, and they need help. And I'll get to that. Like, they probably need some therapy or something, or they need to talk to a spiritual advisor, because um, you know, you should have a level of emotional maturity as you get older, right? As you grow older and you get wiser, then you have more awareness. You should, in theory, have more awareness, right? And so I would say that definitely something to look for. The second thing you want to do is always, in any relationship, is go slowly, proceed slowly. And part of this is, we have this romanticized world where even love bombing is seen as something romantic, but love bombing could be a very dangerous tactic, manipulative tool used by narcissists to get you to fall in love with them and then flip the switch and become emotionally abusive and controlling. So I always say go slowly. It's going to allow you to see any red flags. It's going to allow you to respond accordingly. And yeah, go slowly. That's probably my best advice. It'll also help you to not fall in love so quickly, right? To know that you're going, that you're really having a godly relationship with a godly person. So I would say proceed slowly. The third thing is to guard your heart. The Bible tells us to guard our hearts, right? And so with that, being careful not to reveal yourself too soon, even if the other person is doing that, right? Because that could be issue. There could be issues there. So you want to be vulnerable and you want to grow in intimacy with the other person, but do it in a way that is incremental to the stage of the relationship you're in. So you probably don't want to be talking about your past trauma on your first or second date, right? Unless it's something obviously like very publicly known, or they're a friend of yours that they already know it. Like, unless the person already knows this about you, you probably want to hold off on sharing some of those more intimate details about yourself until you're in a more emotionally safe place with them, which is probably when you're in an exclusive relationship or close to an exclusive relationship with the person, right? And also, people who are like narcissistic behavior sometimes try to get a lot of deep emotional communication from you, like details, deep details, intimate details about you that they can use later against you. So I would suggest being very careful with how much you share about yourself and how deep in conversation. I do suggest going deeper, like sharing more and more as you go, but just being, again, doing it incrementally according to the level of relationship you're in. The fourth thing that you can do is to place boundaries. And like I said earlier, boundaries, I believe, is actually a communication thing, right? Like, and the lack of boundaries is a communication issue. So placing boundaries means sharing what makes you feel uncomfortable, what you expect from the person, and what's going to happen as a consequence if they don't respect your boundaries. That is you being able to communicate that. If you don't communicate that, then there really essentially is no boundary because people are not mind readers. They will not know what your boundaries are unless you express them. So, so as you like, remember when I said the yellow flags, especially with yellow flags, for sure with red flags. If you see that there's a red flag with somebody, like they're being emotionally abusive, like verbally abusive, or they're giving you the silent treatment, absolutely you have to set a boundary 100%. But with the yellow flags, some of this other communication, then you want to maybe give some boundaries little by little and express those boundaries little by little. And then the fifth thing is, in an extreme case, if they're abusive, like if they're verbally abusive, if they ghost you for a month, or if something else, or they do something that's really, like if you place a boundary and they overstep the boundary and don't seem to care, then if you're taking things slowly, you're guarding your heart, you're placing your boundaries, and you're communicating, then this is the moment where you say, my self-worth, my integrity is more important than this relationship. This is not a godly relationship. Maybe the person is godly or maybe the person is not godly, but if they're going through something that's hurting you, that is not a godly relationship. And it's time to either give space or break up. And, we can't go into every relationship, even if the person seems great on paper, assuming that they're the one, that they're your soulmate. That's why I think it's so important to go slowly, and very importantly, and I always say this in my videos, and I'll say it at the end of this one, to trust your gut, to trust your intuition, because your intuition is that internal wisdom that you have, right? I believe it's guided by Holy Spirit. That internal wisdom guided by Holy Spirit is going to it's going to alert you of those yellow flags and red flags, and it's going to help you, right? And I didn't even say this here, but yes, number 6 is to pray about it. Make sure that you pray about it, because if you're not sure what to do, your intuition is usually going to guide you to taking the right step. And unfortunately, a lot of times we ignore it. So I'm not going to say you always have to listen to it. You always have to act on your intuition, but at least listen to it. At least listen to it, right? I was going to say, you don't always trust it, right? Because there might be, maybe you've got some wounds that are making you feel a certain way about it. But I will say unequivocally that every single time I have listened to my intuition, I have been right. Even if I was like questioning and maybe doubtful, but it always ended up being right. And so partially when I communicated with the person my concerns and set boundaries and then listened to what they had to say, they reflected back what my intuition was telling me. And when I ignored my intuition, when I ignored my gut, I got into relationships that ended up being emotionally and verbally abusive and situations that were not godly relationships. And so, if you want a godly relationship, then you need to have godly communication. And godly communication is kind, even if you have to place boundaries. I call them boundaries of love. Boundaries of love is loving for the other person and loving for yourself because you respect yourself. You have integrity and you respect yourself and you respect the person enough to place those boundaries. And so that's what I got for today. Those were those communication red flags. So things like not returning your message right away, ghosting, fear of confrontation, not being able to set boundaries, not being able to express your emotions, avoiding getting mad or screaming when you're upset, passive aggressive behavior, and silence. Those are those communication red flags and yellow flags. And then making sure that you are able to yourself communicate properly, go slowly, take things slowly, let things evolve slowly, guarding your heart, placing boundaries, and praying about it, of course. And if in extreme cases, when you are able to take a step back and listen to your intuition, and if you trust it, knowing that this person is not the right one for you, and ending the relationship or breaking up with them, and really making sure that like that is an act of self-love as well, is making sure that you're guarding your heart. So, with that, if you haven't yet, let me know what your biggest takeaway was for today. I hope that you learned something. And if you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, I appreciate it if you do. We talk about tips, strategies to help you date more intentionally toward holy matrimony. I started this series where we're talking about kind of like these red flags, challenges in relationships. I have a lot of videos on ways to know if you are with the one as well. You could check those out. My computer is being repaired, so I'm going to be doing. I don't have editing software at the moment, so I'm doing a lot of these lives. Let me know in the comments what you'd like to talk about next, and or what you'd like me to talk about next. And yeah, with that, I wish you a blessed rest of your day. Remember to trust your intuition, trust your gut, or at least listen to it, and yeah, and let that guide you in your relationship. And one last note is, as a relationship coach, I do have a special offer right now, 2 strategy sessions with me where we're going to be able to go into your dating, your current relationship, either your current relationship or what is, your kind of your dating history, and allow you to have a vision for what you want for your future marriage, your future relationship, identify any challenges or red flags that might be keeping you from getting that relationship, from attracting that person, that godly spouse that you want, and also just motivating you, inspiring you to get closer to finding the one for you and that godly relationship and the godly marriage that you desire. So I'll post that as well in the comments. And with that, again, have a blessed day. Happy Tuesday. Wonderful to hear from you. Look forward to hearing your takeaways. Listen to your intuition, trust your guts, and have a blessed day. Bye for now.